especially if there's not very many.
There we go. We're recording. Thank you.
If there's just a few people, there's lots more room for a little bit of back and forth dialogue instead of you all having to listen to me drone on for hopefully just an hour, but I have been known to go over time quite often. So we're going to try and stick to an hour, which is this is a big topic to stick to for an hour. So it may seem like I'm going fairly quickly, but you will have the chance to relook at this video. It'll be recorded and posted on OPCC's YouTube page, so you can revisit it and sort of process it a little deeper over time. So don't panic. Thank you all for coming. It's I know you all have better things and bigger things to be doing on a Tuesday afternoon. So I really appreciate you spending a bit of time with us today, talking about big feelings and big behavior. And you may all think this is just about your children, but you may find a little bit of this is about you as well, because the two can't really be separated. So we're going to get going. After this first section, I will stop for some questions. So think about some questions you might have. I'd also like you to, I'll do this first. So we're going to talk a little bit, very little bit, about understanding emotions and behaviors. So we've got a little bit of a common baseline. We're all sort of talking about the same thing. And then I thought it would be best if we just moved into sort of behavior, because that's why you're here. So behavior is such a huge topic. I decided it might work if we narrowed it down to sort of 3 common behaviors that seem to drive parents crazy and create challenges. So not listening in defiance, I've grouped as one, because they're very often go together. Tantrums, we'll talk mostly about the children's, but if you want to talk about your own, we can do that too, because we all have tantrums. And then aggression, which is one that really kind of evokes a lot of emotion in us as adults. We get very concerned when we see children's aggression. So what I'd like you to do as I'm chatting in this first section is think about a circumstance or a situation, yours, or if you feel more comfortable somebody else's, that's fine too. Think about a situation that might fit into one of these 3 behavior categories, because what we're going to do is come back and I'm going to look for a couple of brave souls to maybe help us use the methods I'm going to talk about and sort of deconstruct live an actual circumstance instead of me just giving out some random situation. So I think it'll be much more meaningful if I can sort of talk people through an actual real life behavior. So that is the plan. So I'd like you to think about what you've learned through your life journey about feelings and behavior. We've all been given very overt as well as covert messages growing up about our feelings and emotions and our behavior. And when I think about this, there's a couple of things. So there's a Miranda Lambert song that called Mama's Broken Heart. And the words to this chorus are, girl, it's just a breakup. Go and fix your makeup. Go and hide your crazy. Start acting like a lady. And there are generations previously, not so much this one, I don't think, but certainly my generation and my mother's generation, where that was the message. You hide your feelings, you fix your face, you suck it up, and you don't let anybody see it. Certainly men and males get similar messages. Big boys don't cry. Showing emotion is weakness, all those kinds of things. So I think it's important that we understand where we're coming from as adults and what we've been taught and told about feelings and about behavior, because we've had lots of messages as well about our behavior and what is acceptable and what is not. Many of us, again, more my generation, maybe a little bit to my kids' generation, and certainly previously, we grew up in a very behaviorist kind of approach. So we were our behavior. So the goal of parents and teachers was to train children, eliminate bad behavior, and reinforce and get the good behavior, and life would be fine. Interestingly, many of us could use a little bit of therapy around that, are in therapy. There's a lot of residual things. Many of us thrived and grew up just fine, but there is a population of people. And when you look in the bookstore, go to chapters and look in the self-help. I mean, there's never been so many books about finding happiness and those kinds of things. So can't help but wonder how much of that stems from some of these messages we got when we were kids. This is not a therapy session. I'm not a psychotherapist, so I'm going to stop there with that. But just, it's important to think about where you came from and what you learned, because what we've learned as children is so ingrained in our psyche that we almost unconsciously convey those things to our children. And if those are things that we either are blind to, then we're destined to just repeat it. If those are things that we need to change or we want to change for our children, then we need to be aware, very self-aware, so that we can make those changes. So, feelings. All I can say is it's complicated. It's really complicated. I tried to find a simple, easy definition for feelings, emotions. They're two different things in the science, but I'm going to use them interchangeably just because it is complicated. So if you hear me talking about feelings and emotions, just know that I'm talking about the same thing from my perspective. But they are different things in the science. And they are biological. They come from the midbrain. So we have basically, again, I'm not a neuroscientist, three parts to the brain. We've got the reptilian brain, which takes care of all of our heart beating, our breathing, those things that we don't even think about that keep us alive. Then we have the midbrain, which is where the amygdala lives, among other things. But the amygdala is the big one because that's where the feelings and the emotion come from. And then we have the top brain, the frontal brain. You'll hear people talk about the frontal cortex, and that is the thinking brain. And that is where things like language and planning and intention and all sorts of time management, like all the complex stuff that we think about that we do in life, comes from the front thinking part of our brain. And the interesting thing about children is that thinking part of their brain is not developed. We get little inklings of it coming, which is a sign that it's coming along. But the research says that the frontal cortex of the brain is not fully developed until we're in our, used to be early to mid 20s. Now it's like mid to late 20s, sometimes into 30s. So our brain is under construction for a very long time. So it's important to remember that because as we go through this, when we deal with children's behavior, we tend to use as adults our thinking brain, but because our children aren't using that part of the brain, we're missing the connection that we need to have the influence we need over the behaviors. So I love this little picture. Move you guys all over. Children's emotions are as real as yours. Just because they might get sad over the color of their cup does not make their feelings any less real. And what we need to remember is that children have less experience than we do. So when we have an emotion, we have suitcases full of things that contribute to that emotion. When our children are little, the color of their cup could be the biggest thing that they've had to deal with emotionally, not getting their own way. So we have to make sure that we put into context our children's feelings, because it's important we don't dismiss them. Because if we dismiss them, it sends a message about the importance of them, about communicating them, all those kinds of things. And these messages can be very, very subliminal. So, we don't want to give kids those messages that their feelings aren't valued, they're not important. They're a big part of who we are, and they're a big part of self-esteem as well. So it's just an important piece of growing up. The other thing to know about feelings, and keep this in mind, is that they happen in a split second in our brain. So your children don't wake up in the morning and go, oh, I think today, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm going to be tired and mommy's going to be really tired. So I think 2 o'clock's a good time to have a temper tantrum. It just doesn't happen that way. And we all know that. We know how ridiculous that sounds. But when our child throws themselves on the floor at 2 o'clock because, they haven't had a snack or they can't have that red cup, it's kind of like we think that they're doing it on purpose. And I'm here to tell you, after 40 plus years of working with children, it's not on purpose. It feels like it. I know it feels like it's manipulative. It feels like it's intentional. It's not. It's a very instantaneous, split second reaction. And some kids have bigger reactions than others. That's temperament and things like that influencing that. And that's a whole other topic and whole other workshops. Behavior, it's even more complicated. Emotions sort of come from a lot of biology and environment, but behavior comes from a lot of different places. So it can be even more complicated. But basically, behavior, I love this quote: beneath every behavior, there's a feeling, and beneath each feeling, there is a need. When we meet the need, rather than focusing on the behavior, we begin to deal with the cause, not the symptom. So behavior is a symptom that something isn't working for your child. And it's the same for you. If you think about a time where you had a tantrum, or you felt particularly sad, or you felt like you weren't validated, we all have these things. We all have feelings based in needs. The thing is, children haven't learned some of the things that we've learned, and that's our job, is over time to teach them about these feelings and needs and make sure they're getting met and those kinds of things. So we talk about 4 basic, some say 6, some say 8. I'm going to stick to 4 for ease. 4 basic emotions. So there's happy, sad, angry, and afraid. Now, when you look at a lot of the research, they'll tell you there's 3,000 plus emotions with underneath sort of mixed in with those. Those are the 4 basics. And then you can get into more vocabulary, if you will, under each of those. So that's what that feeling wheel here is. If you look at the middle, it says mad, scared, joyful, powerful, peaceful, and sad. And then you've got sort of more words for each of those categories, and then you have even more. So emotional vocabulary can be very, very rich over time. And that's kind of what we want to do, is we want to teach our children ways to understand and express all those feelings in ways that are healthy for them and not going to hurt other people. So if we think about behavior not as an entity of itself, like a lot of us grew up in, where our job is just to eliminate the behavior, but to go a little deeper. So I called this series Parenting from the Inside Out, because I want us to think about the inside lives of our children, our own inside lives. Because often those things that we might do to extinguish a behavior can actually, in the long run, be quite hurtful to our children's internal lives and their internal dialogues and things like that. So what I'm going to offer you is probably very different, or could be very different from some of the other things you've read or heard about. I would encourage you just to have an open mind. I'm not here to tell you how to parent your kids. I'm here to just offer you a perspective that you can consider, things that resonate with you, grab hold of them and investigate and give it a try. Things that you're like, oh no, that's not me, that's not my child, that'll never work. That is up to your discretion as well. These are your children. You know them best. So all I'm here to do is really just offer a perspective and some tools that you may find helpful. There's a man named Dr. Ross Green, and he says children do well if they can. And you can look him up. He wrote a book called, one of his books is The Explosive Child. And I truly embrace and believe that philosophy. And I don't believe it's just children. I think we all do the best we can in any given moment. Um, and you know yourself as an adult, you wake up some days and it's just like everything falls into place. You are like that person you always want to be. Things just go smoothly and everybody's happy and you're happy and life, it's just a great day. And then there are other days you wake up and you've got no patience, you're not feeling well, and you're doing the best you can on those days too. And so are your children. So we always want to try and give our kids the benefit of the doubt. And if we can believe that they're doing the best they can, we tend to be less harsh in our views and what we tell ourselves about our kids. If we say to ourselves, you know, well, this may not be good enough, but he's doing the best he can, as opposed to, oh, he's trying to get to me and he's doing this on purpose and he's trying to make me mad. Those two mindsets are going to elicit very different responses. So if we can kind of adopt this, kids are doing the best they can, it softens our ability to respond. And we can take a few minutes to think about what we want to do instead of having that big emotional reaction about our kids. So I love this analogy of behavior is an iceberg. So as most of you know, if you know anything about the Titanic, they saw just a little piece of the iceberg, but underneath was the bulk of the iceberg. And our kids' behaviors are the same. So we have behavior, which is what we see. You know, kids throwing things, tantruming, hitting, mouthing off, whatever. And that's probably about a quarter of the picture. And then underneath is sort of the meaning behind the behavior. So what's really going on? If we can believe that the behavior is just a symptom, it's what we see, then it invites us to look deeper within to see what else we might be able to learn about this behavior. So parenting is a lot of the time about being curious. We don't know everything. We're not expected to know everything. Our children are ever evolving, so we don't even know our kids sometimes from one day to the next. So it's unfair to expect that you're going to wake up every morning and just know what to do and, you know, all of that. So developing this mindset of curiosity can really help you to get to know your children and get to know yourself as a parent as you go through the journey. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of what this is. So we have anger. So what do angry kids do? Sometimes they scream, they swear, they stomp, they throw things, all those kinds of things. And if we think about not just what we see, but underneath, why? What is the why for this behavior? We could have children who are hurt, who are feeling anxious, worried, jealous, embarrassed, sad, disappointed, frustrated, overwhelmed, scared, ashamed. Those are the common ones for anger. You could put in a whole bunch of other ones as well. So if your child came to you and said, Mommy, Daddy, I'm feeling really scared right now, what would you say and what would you do? Would you say to them, you know what? That's ridiculous. You need to stop right now. Don't tell me about those things. I don't want to know. Just be quiet. I asked you to put your coat on. We're going to the haunted house, whether you like it or not. Is that what we would do with scared children? I don't think so. I think we would try to comfort and soothe and make them feel safe. And that's what we need to think about when we see our children being angry, for example. If we can figure out in the moment underneath what the feeling is, and we deal with it from the feeling perspective as opposed to the behavior, all of a sudden we can be much more helpful for our children. And this isn't easy. This takes time, and I like to talk about active parenting versus passive parenting. So when life is good and things are going swimmingly well, maybe when your children are sleeping, that's passive parenting. You're enjoying it and you're engaged, but but you're not really working hard at it. Sometimes there are days where you don't really have to do much as a parent because it's just a great day for everybody. And you enjoy those things and you embrace them and you remember them because they don't last any more than these behaviors last. But then we have active parenting. So when things are tough and things are rocky and bumpy and you're under that iceberg, that's when we have to take an active role in parenting. That's when we have to take action and do something. So there's lots of times where we have to do that. So our parenting role is ever changing. So I'm going to challenge you and encourage you to think about what lies under that iceberg when your child is having trouble. And there's another saying, your child is not giving you trouble, he's having trouble. I can't remember exactly what it was. I'll see if I can find it later. He's not giving you a hard time, he's having a hard time. So sometimes how we frame things with our kids is important. We tend to talk about all the negative, bad behavior, troublesome, challenging stuff. But the same premise is true when there's contentment and happiness and things are going well. You also get a set of behaviors, right? You get compliance and cooperation and the ability to, do all sorts of things. Those also come from feelings and things underneath. So we need to remember that behavior is not just the negative stuff, the bad stuff. It's also thinking about, well, when is it that my child seems to be having a good time, is happy and content and, I hate to use the word compliant, but compliant. When are they listening? When are they, not having tantrums and things like that? And think about the feelings and the things that go on underneath those as well. So try and stay focused on a good balance. There's sort of the positive behaviors, and then there's the behaviors that challenge us, and we always tend to gravitate to the negative in life. We tell 10 people when we're not happy about something, but we only tell one when we are. So it's a bit of human nature. So again, we might have to make an effort to think about and observe and realize, when is it our children are happy and what's going on in those times. Are you very attentive? Are you well rested as a parent? Because you have a big influence on your children's behavior, whether you know it or not. So here's what I'm going to suggest. As I said before, children's thinking brains are not fully developed, and when they're in high emotional states, the thinking brain is not available. What little part of the thinking brain that might be developed, because it is an ongoing process for 20 or 30 years, but it's not available. So the amygdala shuts off the thinking brain. So now we have all of this emotion and feelings emitting. And if you remember, the thinking brain contains the language center. So it's important to realize that the emotional state, the emotional brain, does not have a whole lot of language. Some of you will argue when your child screams at you, "I hate you, you're the worst mom ever." It's like, that's language. It is, but it is not language that's thought through and mindful. It is emotions spewing through some words. So one of the big things about children's behavior is don't take it personally. It is about your child. It is not about you. You can influence it, but this is your children's experience. So we want to remember that. And our only goal, and some of you might challenge me on this, your only goal in the moment is to calm your child. Because the language center is shut down, any efforts you make to rationalize, to negotiate, to work through with words, to problem solve, none of those are going to be overly effective when your child is ramped up, because they can't say the words, but they also can't process the words. And you may find often when you talk too much to your child when they're upset, it makes them worse. And that's because their poor little brains are just, they're like this and they can't keep up. And all you're doing is putting more input in for their brains to try and work through, and they become more overwhelmed. So your only goal when your child is in a moment, and it is a moment in time, you try and remember that this isn't forever, this isn't going to last forever, this is a moment in time. Your goal is to figure out how to calm this child down. Now, I will caution you, you're kind of like a firefighter. So you figure out some great strategies, and we'll talk about a few. And you're like a firefighter, and you put the hose out, and you get the feelings all kind of down, and it looks like it's over. And just like a fire in a warehouse, the firefighters hang around for a little while because it's hot spots. So with a little breeze on that hot spot, all of a sudden you've got another fire going. So one of the pitfalls we have as parents is we think because our child has calmed down and can now maybe even talk to us a little bit, that it's over, that it's done. We can now move on because we got time, we got things to do. And often, if the child isn't truly calmed down and they have hot spots or they're still smoldering, you haven't given it enough time to fully go out, then you're going to reignite the situation. And many of you have probably experienced that, where you think your child is fine, and then you're like, okay, let's get your shoes. And all of a sudden you're back to where you were 10 minutes ago with the meltdown. So this takes time, and time is the enemy of parents. I get it. We don't have time, we think. But I will tell you that in parenting, your children will force you to take the time one way or another. So you're either going to take the time fighting and screaming and dealing with the behavior, which most of the time takes longer. Doesn't feel like it, but it takes longer than if you just take a step back, come up with a plan, deal with the emotion and the need for the child before you try to push on. Children can't tell time till they're like 8 or 9, and there's a reason for that. So developmentally, when we put time constraints on our children, it's a concept that they're not really capable of understanding. So we want to remember that as well. So when your child is having a difficult time, the first thing we have to do is check in with ourselves, because all of our kids' behavior evokes emotions in us. And you know that if you go into a situation heated and your child is heated, it rarely ends up well. So children need us to have our thinking brains on and our calmness before we engage, because that's what helps them. It's called co-regulation. So children co-regulate based on where we're at. So when we are frazzled and frantic and screaming and tense, it makes our children worse. So the first thing we do is we check in with ourselves, we take a breath. Unless your child is going to be hurt, an extra minute or two of throwing themselves on the floor is no big deal. You're already in it. And calm yourself before you approach your child. So how you do that is a very personal thing. Those of you who like yoga might take some breaths. Those of you who developing a mantra, something to, a quick sentence or two that you can say to yourself that kind of helps bring you back to this center, is important. So take care of you first is basically what this is saying. Then I want you to take another minute or two, and you'll do more of this later, but like after the situation. But in the situation, I want you to consider what the situation was and determine what feelings and needs your child might have. And I mean, there's lots of handouts about feelings and needs, and you can take a screenshot of the one I have on the other slide, post it somewhere, so you can try and think about what it is and keep it simple. Children's needs are simple because they're simple little beings. So if you're trying to get your child dressed in the morning and you didn't have time for breakfast, and now you're like, come on, we're going to be late. Well, first of all, I just said children don't have a sense of time. Children do not cope well with being rushed. And unfortunately, we live in a very rushed world. So they need you to slow down. They need life to slow down. They may need breakfast if they haven't had breakfast. So really think about, in that particular situation, what is it your child might need? Because it is not the children's job to meet our needs. It is our job to meet our children's needs. And when their needs are met, they become in a better place, and then we can get our needs met. So children's needs, unfortunately, supersede adult needs. Because they don't know how to wait. Again, this is a development thing. So between 5 and 7, children develop the ability to have mixed feelings and to consider other people and all those kinds of things. So it's a little more easy for a child to wait their turn while you finish a phone call, or wait a few minutes while you make dinner, those kinds of things. But when you're dealing with children under 5, these are things that developmentally are very, very difficult, if not at times impossible for children to do. So it is our job to meet their needs first, their basic needs at least. This is the hardest one, and why the first check mark is so important. We have to respond calmly to our children. Again, if we're ramped up, we're going to ramp them up even more. And we want to be empathetic. And lots of people will say, well, aren't you giving in? Let's use tantrums, for example. Well, aren't you giving into the tantrum? What are you teaching them if you're all soft and nice and, oh, I understand? And no, what you're teaching children is that you understand that you're there to protect them, to make them feel safe, to take care of them. They're learning relationship skills when you do that. Now, are you going to give the child the chocolate bar after the tantrum? Absolutely not. That is not what we're going to do. So really helping children through these tough times is strengthening and building that relationship and that sense of trust and security that really, when push comes to shove, is essential to being able to parent your children later. So these little things these are just test runs, trust me. Bigger kids, bigger problems. And if you want your children to come to you when they're 15, and to trust when they're 15 that you're there for them, you can help them, you won't judge them, all those things, then you start this now. These are the steps you start to build that sense with your children of a relationship with you, so that later it's just ingrained. They can take it for granted, they trust it, and they can come to you more. They still won't come to you when they're teenagers about everything, trust me. You want to focus on the children's feelings and needs. And a little hint, if what you're doing is making it worse, stop doing it. Now, empathy will often make children cry more, and that's actually a good thing. That's an attachment behavior it's almost a sense of relief. But if you're trying to talk to a child and he starts to hit you and things like that, stop talking. Right? And our tendency is to start talking more. You can't hit me, don't do that, that's rude. I can't let you, blah, 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 blah. And again, your child's out of control, so they're having trouble processing all that. So sometimes just sitting and being, and we live in a very busy world, so sometimes we're not overly good at just being, but it serves a great purpose here. So take your time, talk less, actions speak volumes. So again, hold their hand if they'll allow you to touch them. A lot of children who are upset don't want to be touched, and you need to respect that. But your physical presence in the room helps. So don't feel like you have to actively do something. Just be there if that's all your child needs. Your job is to take care of the relationship. Once everybody's calm, then you need to decide as the parent whether or not this problem needs needs to be addressed immediately, later, or ever. Sometimes there are circumstances where it's just, you go through it, you resolve it, you move on, and you never go back and address it. It's just not that important. It's a flash thing, the color of a cup. You're not going to go back and talk about, how a green cup and a red cup are the same, because to your child, they're not. And it's really not that big a deal. There are some things that you'll need to address immediately, and most of the stuff you will address later. Because the teachable moments come when children are calm and alert, not when they're ramped up. Reflect on the situation, think about how you responded, what your child's needs were you right when you sort of tried to figure it out earlier in the system, in the process? How did it all play out? Did it play out as you thought it would? Was it better? Was it worse? How could you change it for next time? And then look at, most importantly, what are the teachables for later? So what is it that your child needs to learn or develop to mitigate future behavioral issues that are similar? A lot of times with young children, it's developmental. So sometimes you just have to wait until the child's development catches up. And that's a hard one. And again, more reason to support the child through the experience instead of punishing them or making them feel bad. Because if they developmentally can't do it, then it's not really fair to punish them. And a little hint, development comes and goes. It's like waves. So just because your child can do something once does not mean now it's a done deal. It ebbs and flows, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So development is not a straight line. So children who can dress themselves will often get up in the morning and go, oh, dress me. And you're like, oh no, because we push for independence. No, you know how to dress yourself. You get dressed. I'm going to go and blah, 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 blah. And the child goes, wah! And all of a sudden you've got this huge tantrum. Well, let's think about why a child might not want to get dressed by himself. Maybe he's feeling tired. Maybe he doesn't want to go where you're asking him to go. Maybe he's overwhelmed with the amount of clothing he has to put on. So there are a lot of reasons in that moment that make it different from yesterday when the child got up, got dressed, and went and woke you up in bed and said, look, I'm dressed. So things change with kids, which is one of the challenges of parenting. One of many is there's just not a straight line here. So when we talk about teachables, how do you teach children about feelings and behavior? Again, learning does not happen in the heat of the moment. So in and around the time of challenging behavior, the lessons you teach are relationship lessons. The skill lessons come later, and they can be very sort of practical and planned, or they can just be things that happen throughout the day that you become more mindful of. So here's just a few suggestions. Role play and practice. So if you're doing something that you think is going to be problematic, but you're going to go to a restaurant, and the last thing you want is your child to melt down. The last thing you want to say to that child is, you better not fill in the blank, because that creates an emotional response in the child. And if you were with me last time, I think I touched very briefly on counter will. The more you say to a child, you better not, the more instinctively they are inclined to do it. And if any of you watched the video I suggested by Gordon Neufeld last week, he talks about a story where his grade 2 teacher, who he was not attached to, on the first day of school, they had an assembly, and she said, if I see any of you children booing, there's going to be trouble. And Neufeld said, it never even occurred to me to boo. And yet in the middle of the assembly, I found myself booing. And he said, I was as surprised as everybody else. So there are instincts in us that we're not designed, particularly with people we're not attached to do what they ask us to do. So a better approach would be to role play restaurant. So set up a little restaurant in your house, a pretend restaurant, and teach your children how to behave in a restaurant. What's going to happen? The waitress is going to come, or the server's going to come over, and they're going to do this and that. Kind of like the way, what's his name? Totally lost it. It'll come back. Mr. Rogers. If you ever watch Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, we all sit there now and go, oh my God, just hurry up, speed it up. he had a degree in child development. Um, and he talks in a very slow, methodical way, but he explains everything to the children in the show so that they understand all the nuances and who's who and what's this. And that's how children learn. And it's slow. Children take things in slowly. So we have to slow down. So role play and practice takes a big, um, has a big influence in children learning about the world. That's why when they dramatic play is so important to them. They're trying things out. Observation. I used to love to do that. I still love to do this, but I used to do this with kids too. Look for situations in life where you can watch somebody and then talk about it, just discreetly. Um, could be TV shows if you've got a child that can't be discreet. I used to go to the mall with my kids, and so a child would be really sad, and we would make up stories like, "Oh, I wonder how's that child feeling?" It's much easier for children to learn things about feelings when they're not in a feeling. When it's somebody else, when it's third person, third party, puppets, watching other people, it's safer for them to explore this. So we used to watch, kids and stuff and say, how do you think they're feeling? And, that kind of thing. So children could observe and watch. Dan Siegel has a phrase, name it to tame it. We want to give kids a rich vocabulary. They need to be able, ultimately, when their brains are developed, to use language to express their feelings. So we have to give them those words. So start with happy, sad, mad, and scared. But don't be afraid to use bigger, more descriptive words as children get older. And there are different nuances of scared. I could be terrified. So we want to give kids that rich vocabulary, help them recognize their feelings, how their bodies are feeling, because those are cues. Often bodies will tell us before anything else what's coming. And in addition, we want them to recognize these things in others, right? So how do you think that person's feeling? What do they're shaking. What do you think that means? Those kinds of things. One of the things that we, for many reasons, we struggle with as parents these days is giving children the opportunity to have and work through all their feelings. We tend to deny them, we distract them, we suppress them, we tell them not to cry, those kinds of things. And we want children to have a full experience with all the feelings that they're going to have in life. And this can be hard as a parent. We don't want to see our kids sad. We don't want to see our kids disappointed. We don't want to see our children hurt. But those are all things, if we protect our children from those feelings, what they learn later on when we're not there to protect them is, I can't handle these feelings. And they don't know what to do with them when they do get them, because they will get them. You're not going to be around to protect them forever. So the best protection you can give children is to allow them to have the feelings that they have. So we want to be important. We want to be careful about and mindful about the messaging we send to kids. So I learned a long time ago, I don't tell children not to cry. If a child is crying because he's scared because he's just been left in daycare with a complete stranger and he misses his mummy, who am I to say to that child, stop feeling those feelings? And when we tell children to stop crying, the message really is, stop those feelings. So we want to empathize. You miss your mommy. This is scary. You don't know anybody here, right? And you know yourself. If your friend comes over and empathizes with you, you may cry a little more, but you feel better. You feel understood. You feel safe. You feel better. So don't be afraid to sort of hit these feelings head on, and label them, and allow your child to have the full experience, to go from being really mad to sad to I'm okay now, those kinds of things. Teach healthy coping strategies, exercise, breathing, hugs, time with caring adults. So come sit on my lap. Some kids like to be alone. If you've got an introverted child, sometimes they need the alone time to recharge. reading. There's lots of things. Containment. You can set up tents and boxes and places where children can go to still be around you, but because a lot of kids don't want to be in the room because that feels very isolating. So there may be a reading corner, or there might be a tent or somewhere where a child can feel like they're contained, but they're still close by, those kinds of things. And lastly, talk about feelings. We all have feelings. We have them all day, every day. We want to talk about them a lot. We want to narrate to our children what we know and what we feel about things. Oh my goodness, look at that bird. Oh, that bird makes me feel so happy. You know, oh, look, that squirrel's sleeping on the road. That makes me so sad. Those kinds of things. So we want to narrate, and we want to talk about feelings so that children don't think that this is some mysterious place where, you know, there are only certain times and certain feelings that we're allowed to talk about. I will say, be careful to own your own feelings if you want your children to own theirs. And don't make children responsible for your feelings or the feelings of others. You make me so angry. Angry is, in an adult, is not always a choice, but can sometimes be a choice depending on where your emotional brain is at. But your child triggered it, but you have to own the anger. The anger is yours. You know, I'm so frustrated. Stop there. Not you make me so frustrated. Because when we put that burden on children, they're so busy trying not to make you feel things that their feelings get put aside. So it's really important that we own our own feelings, and not blame our children or others. You know, your dad makes me so mad. Oh, your mother is so ridiculous. No, these are not child conversations. These are things between adults. Okay, I'm going to take a breath. That's a lot of stuff, and see what questions might be out there.
Thanks, Nikki. I think I'm going to try and unmute everybody. I see Chacha has her hand up, so I will see if I can just unmute her, because I think everybody is muted. Oh, Chacha, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi. Hi.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
My son started full-time daycare recently. We did have to transition him from one daycare to another, but now he is settled down. What we do is now I don't get to spend as much time with him. So as soon as he gets off the daycare, we go to a park or a library, and we spend time. However, what happens is then he gets so excited, and obviously he's tired, but he cannot settle down. I don't know how to help him. Like we still have our nighttime routine. We'll come home, read books, and try to settle down, but he cannot seem to settle down. And
How old is he?
3.5.
Okay. Is he highly active?
Sorry?
Is he a highly active child?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. And when you say he can't settle, what does that look like?
So after we finish our nighttime routine, we will put him in the bed, and he will run out of the room, and he will try to come up. On the other hand, if I would just put him in the car seat and drive, I'm sure he'll sleep because he's trapped in.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's not at that age where, we won't put him back in the crib.
No.
But yeah, I don't know, like I understand.
What is your sense as his mom? What is it he needs or he's feeling when you put him to bed?
I think he just wants to have more fun. Also, it's, you know, he does get tired, and sometimes when I'm tired myself, I will probably start binge watching, even though I clearly know I should go to sleep.
Okay.
Uh,
What time do you
and
pick him up?
I pick him up at 7 in the morning.
What time do you
From
pick him
the
up at
daycare,
night?
4:45.
4:45?
Yeah.
Okay. And what time does he go to bed?
Between 7:30 to 8.
Okay. So an observation, he's got roughly 3 hours with you a night.
Yeah.
And that's filled with getting ready for dinner, getting ready for bed, brushing teeth, and all those other things that we have to do as parents. I'm not suggesting that these are not things we don't have to do, because we do. So we've got a highly active little boy who's probably been contained all day quite a bit. They do go outside twice a day for a couple of hours. But highly active children, 2 hours a day probably isn't enough to tire them out. They never seem to tire out. And we have a little boy who's been away from you for 10 or 12 hours, 10 hours, and gets to spend 3 hours, maybe 4 if we count an hour in the morning. And possibly an hour out of that 4 has no agenda that is adult driven.
Yeah.
So by the time he goes to bed, he's not filled up with you yet.
Mm.
Is that an option?
Yeah. I mean, as I said, he has
we're not
moved
gonna-
from half day to full day.
Okay. So when did that happen?
August 29th, to be precise. So
Okay.
yeah.
So that's another huge clue that he's likely missing you.
Yeah.
Children, we have to understand, we can have enough of children by 7:30. We're done. We love them dearly. We adore them. We can't wait to get up the next day, but we're done. It's like, okay, you go to bed now because I need some me time. I got things to do, whatever the reason. We have to understand that with young children, even when they're with you all day, they're not done with you. It's a 24/7 need for children. And what happens with kids who are new in daycare is he's going to school, and I'm glad to hear he's settled now. He needs to develop a good, solid, attached relationship to his teacher so that she can fill him up a little bit in that same similar way, so that throughout the day, he's not emptying out. So by the time you get him back at the end of the day, here's a child with an empty bucket.
Yeah.
So, and all of our agenda items, which again, I know we have to do, but we need to really evaluate how much of it do we have to do? Are there things that we can combine, or that we can, is there something else we can do to help fill this child up? Because Neufeld's work tells us that separation is the pivotal anxiety for children, is to be away from their parents or their attachment figures. So when parents are the primary or the only attachment figure while a child is adjusting to daycare or whatever, then the imminent need for them to be close is huge.
Yeah.
So often when we put kids to bed, overtired or not tired are killers for bed. You can't put a child who's not tired to bed without something to do. You can put them to bed, but you got to give them books and a flashlight or something quiet to entertain them, or they're just going to lay there, and that's going to last about 30 seconds. And overtired children need our help to go to sleep, because they are overstimulated, they're overdone, and they don't know how to relax themselves. So we need to find strategies, or use ourselves, to help these overtired children settle in. And we think that because we're overtired, we crash and burn. That kids do the same, and they don't. It's actually prohibitive to sleep. And overtired children will often wake up in the night as well. So I would suggest it could be a number of things. And again, you know him best. But certainly bedtime separation at night is a big deal for most kids. That's why co-sleeping works for kids. I'm not suggesting you need to do that unless that's something you want to do. There's nothing wrong with doing it. It works for your children, but if it doesn't work for you, don't do it. But it is an option always for parents who choose to do it. But understand that from the child's perspective, nestling in close to you and having you right there all night long is just like, this is safe and secure. This is what the relationship is supposed to provide for children. So we have to find ways to substitute that. Whether you lay with him, whether you check in on him, whether you give him something of yours to sleep with. There's lots of different strategies. You need to think about if that is part of or the reason. And some of this will settle once his daycare adjustment is fully done. So some of that will settle. I like to hear that you're taking them to the park and stuff, because kids, whether they're in school or in daycare, need that outlet generally before they step foot in the house. So that's great. Get rid of some of that extra energy. But try and think of ways to really make him feel connected to you in the short period of time that you have, while you're still having to get your other stuff done. So can he make dinner with you? Can you make him part of the process so that he's feeling connected, like you're doing things together, even though it may not be what he wants to do, but a lot of kids like to cook and do things like that. They want to be like you. So try and think of some strategies that can integrate his need to be close with your need to get stuff done in a short period of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah. Thank you. And just another question is, he's the only child.
Yeah.
And I take him to early on programs and everything. And I think now sometimes when he sees me, playing with other kids or stuff like that, I think maybe he feels a bit jealous. And then he would try to, have those big feelings out, wherein he would try to take away a toy from that other kid, or he would, like do something that's not usually acceptable to the other kid. So what I do is, now I just distract him. I'm like, hey, what happened to your truck? Where is it? Where did it go? And, he gets distracted, but I would like to sit down and talk about those feelings, but I don't know how, because.
Okay, so there's a couple of things. He doesn't necessarily know what he doesn't know. So I'm not sure that he would be jealous. He might be. But 3.5-year-old little boys, and I emphasize little boys because little boys tend to be developmentally a little bit slower than girls to catch up with things.
Yeah.
It's not that they're delayed at all. They just develop differently. So at a 3.5-year-old little boy, probably he really wants to play with these other kids. So it may be more about wanting to play and interact, because now he's becoming more interested in the idea of friends.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he knows that the difference between those are friends and those are siblings necessarily. So I think maybe he just wants to play with these kids. The problem is he's 3.5 and he doesn't know how yet. So he doesn't know. A lot of kids take toys and hit other kids and stuff because they don't know actually how to engage or introduce themselves or ask to play. These are not things that kids are born knowing. And we take it for granted that if we throw a bunch of kids into a group, they're just going to figure it out and learn it. And they do, but not without some growing pains if they don't have adult guidance. So yeah, they're going to take toys because that's the natural thing for them to do. Little boys in general, talking is less effective a strategy for boys because the language center of their brain, we're wired for language as females, and boys are wired for action. So they learn through active engagement, not through words. And as these female moms and teachers who love to talk, because we do, we overload our little boys sometimes. So I would suggest that you do more role playing. and maybe more observing. So pretend, I'm going to pretend to be you and you pretend to be Johnny, and just start to have these little interactions where you're pretending, how do you ask a friend to play? And let him practice and let him see you doing it. Point it out when other people are doing it. Oh, look, see how she went over there, and don't judge it. See how nicely she went? No. See how she went over there and she asked to play with her words? Let's try that. So you want a more active engagement to teach, and this works for girls too. It's just girls can use both language and action. Boys tend to gravitate to active learning. So I would suggest you use less words and more interactive, observational kinds of strategies to help him. He just needs to learn the social skills. That's all it is. He's now developed. 2-year-olds aren't really all that interested in each other because they're still very self-centered. But by the time children are 3 and 3.5, they're starting to realize it can be, especially when they're in daycare, it can be a lot of fun to play with other people, but they don't know how to do it. So our job as adults and teachers is to figure out strategies and ways we can help children learn this. We notice when they're doing it in a way that is appropriate. I noticed you went over and asked him to play and he said yes, and look, you guys had a great time. High five. Those kinds of things. So social skills is a tough one to learn, and again, it's a slow process, and we live in a world that races through things. So it can be very difficult for children, even in a daycare setting, because there's lots of transitions and routines and things like that interrupt children's social play. So it can be really hard for kids. So use books, use puppets, role play, those kinds of things. Let go of the guilt that he doesn't have a sibling, because it's probably not even on his radar right now. It might be later, but he'll ask you.
Yeah.
So I think right now it's more likely that he's now in this daycare setting, and he's developed, he's around kids all the time, and he's trying to figure out his way in that world.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thanks, Chacha. Nikki, we have a couple more hands up. So Jessica, I'll come to you next. And then I have somebody I don't know behind the screen here. I'll see if she's still there or he's still there. It's under the name.
Can we do vinegar?
Hello.
Hello. Vinegar?
Hi, sorry. I'm sorry. It's Sarah. I'm under self-rep S. I use the Zoom for other things. Hi. Oh, okay. So, sorry. Should I go first or Jessica?
No, you go ahead. Sorry, did I unmute both of you? Yeah, Jessica, you go ahead, Sarah. Thanks. You were there.
Okay.
You're up first. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So I have a sick kiddo while I'm home, so you hear coughing, potentially tantrums, all that stuff. Thank you for this. This is great. I had a couple of questions. One isn't a super duper, hopefully easy one. Is when a child hurts themselves, my tendency is to say, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Is there other words that I can use? I stop myself because I say it will be okay, because it's kind of gaslighting, saying it's okay, well, you have like a scraped knee. But that's like my natural thing to say. But is there something else that I can say that might work better?
The first thing to do is wait, because sometimes when we think children have hurt themselves, they actually don't, and they wait for our reaction. So if we go, are you okay? They're like, oh my God, I must not be. Right? So the first thing is to just take a step back and smile at them. If there's not bleeding or bones sticking out, smile at them, give them a cue without words, and see what happens. Because often kids they bounce better than we think. So they'll get up and then look at them and judge by their face and stuff. And you might just say,
No, I guess I'm talking when it's actually they are actually hurt, when they're hurt and seeking comfort. when they're
Okay.
like not
So
not a false alarm, like when they're
So we've got a
actually
scraped knee and
upset.
those hurt, by the way. Those of you who are not an
Yeah.
who are adults and haven't had a scraped knee recently, they hurt. So don't undermine them. So we want to do that empathy thing. Oh, that hurts. Ouch. And then just leave it there, because we do this. Parents do this really well. They do this empathy piece, but then there's an added, but you're going to be okay, which is just, it dismisses the empathy that you just worked so hard to provide, right?
Yeah.
So
Are there any other words, like I'm talking like when they're crying and they're in your arms, like are
just
there
hold them.
you were
Just hold
okay.
them. Again, sometimes words are not as effective as we might like them to be. So just hold them. And one of the best tricks for relationship building with kids when you're hugging is don't release the hug, let the child release it. Because if you think of it as a gas tank, when you're hugging a child, think of it as a gas tank. So child's filling up, filling up, filling up, filling up, filling up. And it can seem, don't look at your watch. It can seem like a really long time. It often isn't. But when the child kind of pushes away, it's a sign that they're full or they're okay. So you've done your job.
That's not kind words. That's not kind words to say that to mommy. You can, sorry, 1 second.
Yep.
Not kind. You can say, mommy, I need some space. Brielle, that's not kind words. Okay, sorry. Sorry.
That's okay.
Maybe I was
This is
trying
a
to do this
really
when my
common
kids are
thing.
homesick.
This is a really common thing though. When your attention gets taken away, kids ramp up. It's a natural, again, when children sense there's something between you and them, whether it's, you're hugging your spouse or you're on the phone or you're making dinner or you're trying to do a webinar, as soon as children feel like there's a wedge between the two of you, they will ramp up and try and get rid of whatever it is that's in their way. So that it's perfectly normal behavior.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. No, that's great advice, because I think I tend to fill
Yeah,
fill it
less
with
words. Less words.
So
But
okay.
the less we talk, the more our children talk.
Oh gosh, that would be wow. I can't even imagine that world. Okay. For anyone who knows me and my daughter. Okay, so my next one, this might be probably a little bit more convoluted, is I don't know if you even got to it. Is around the aggressive. I don't know if you got to that yet as part of
No, not yet.
the present. Okay, then I'll park that for that one.
So what I'm going to do when we get to that section is ask if somebody would like to share a story about a situation with their child. So if you're comfortable to speak up, you come back at that time, and maybe we can try and decompress using that 6-step model a little bit.
Sure. Great. And I'm sorry, I had a third thing. My daughter she's sick. She's sick. She's been really sick for the past couple days, but she's really struggling at school. She just started JK in September.
Okay.
And I know you're saying the thing about to the previous person around filling up the cup and connecting with their other providers, but she's at public school. She went to OPCC and loved it. Her facilitators and providers were like surrogate moms to her. They were just amazing, and she loves it, and she talks about missing it all the time. And I've tried to say this to her school. She's had her teacher change twice. Her teacher doesn't even, it gets the executive assist or executive EA to email me back, not the teacher. And literally, I think they're just basically, here you go, your kid's alive at the end of the day. Don't bother me. And so I'm really struggling because she's not adjusting well to school at all. And she just is a child that needs an emotional connection. And I heard, it doesn't necessarily have to be a teacher. It can be a student, but she's been sick a whole bunch. And she's just, there's no emotional connection at school. And it's really not going well. I'm kind of giving myself, oh, sorry.
That's okay. I can't get into this a lot, but it cannot be a student. Children cannot attach to other children. That's inappropriate, and it's developmentally a problem. And we do it all the time in our culture. Children need to attach to adults. So And I know the schools struggle with that because there's only 1 or 2 teachers and lots of kids. And so they do tend to, but we have to be careful about that attachment. True attachment. I mean, they can be friends, but they can't attach. And we'll talk more about that in my next session, which is about social development and friends. In terms of struggling, it doesn't feel like it, but it's still early in the year. So she's only been in school a couple of months. For some kids, that's
Don't do
not
that to
long enough.
mommy.
If there's been lots of changes and things, then that could be a problem as well.
Please, that's breaking mommy's thing.
So I'd give it a
Come with
little more
mommy.
time. Hopefully things will settle down. If they don't, there are options. You can talk to the school about going part-time. If that's an option for you in terms of your own.
We are effectively going part-time right now as it is. My thing is, how do I get the actual, like, I can't force them to want to do an emotional connection with my child,
No,
right? Like,
no.
so,
Yeah, this is probably one that's bigger than we have time to talk about today, unfortunately.
Okay.
Everybody else
Okay.
waiting.
yeah, no problem.
You might be able to call Christine though.
Christine knows.
She might be able to.
Christine knows. Yeah.
She might be able to.
The only thing I can think of off the top of my head, Sarah, since you seem to be like in a bit of a bind, and I know we talked about it when I saw you a few weeks ago, is potentially trying to hold onto that emotional connection. And maybe Nikki might have some input onto this as well with you while you're apart. And if you are able to do something more on a part-time, and it might, I know that you have a very busy schedule, but maybe picking her up early a couple times a week or whatever it might be. But while you're apart, how do you keep emotionally connected? Is there objects you can give her? Is her, like that kissing handbook? I don't know if you know it, but
I've done all this. All this. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So maybe, we'll park this because I've done all the suggestions. I'm willing to keep on trying to wait it out, but I just can't force it. I can't force somebody to care about my child. Like, I just can't. And it's,
and I'm gonna say that there was another parent that just put up her hand and put her input into the chat room that says that they miss OPCC very much as well, and educators are all across the board amazing in their own ways. The smaller class sizes here, things like that, are really going to be they're going to lead the way for that emotional connection to happen a little bit easier than you'll get in the school system. But it's a tough,
and schools have a different mandate than daycares. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
The one thing to know is just because we have a JK system in place does not mean it's right for every child.
Yeah.
So depending on your child's development, depending on your child's temperament and all those things, there's a lot of children, in my opinion, that they are not ready.
what movie you want to watch?
And for that environment. So that's something else to think about. There's nothing that says, unless you're on subsidy, that a child is not going to be in any deficit as far as I'm concerned. I worked in childcare for 20 years. Children are not at a deficit if they stay in daycare an extra year. It's like a lap year, give or take. So if a child does better in a daycare setting because the ratios are smaller and it's a more intimate setting and there's a different mindset, then I'm not saying give up on JK right away, but if after a period of time you feel like she's still, it's still not working for her, those first experiences in school are important. They have a lasting impact on the attitude towards school. So I would need to know more about your child's temperament. Is she sensitive? All those kinds of things to sort of be able to help you more, which may be a more individual conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, Nikki.
You're welcome.
I'll chat with you more, Sarah. I'm always here if you need me.
Thank you.
I'm gonna see if Jessica still is able to jump in with her question, and then we can keep moving along. So
We'll keep going, yeah.
There we go. Hello, Jessica.
Hi.
Hey, Jessica.
Okay, so I have a 13-and-a-half-month-old.
Okay.
And we are literally struggling with everything. So
Yep.
getting her in the car seat, doing diaper changes, getting her dressed.
Yep. All those
At this
things.
age, like, what is there that I can do to help these situations?
So this is normal. First of all, it's nothing that you're doing or not doing. This is a development. This is an autonomy stage. So is she active by chance?
very active. She doesn't
Okay.
stop even in her sleep.
Yeah. So active kids have an enormous dislike for anything that even remotely resembles restraint. So it can be a struggle to get anything sort of done. So, and I'm sure you've done some of this stuff. So some of it is developmental. You might just have to wait her out a little bit and just, get through it as best you can. There are certain things that are non-negotiable. So there's an adaptation process that happens with children, and it's an important one. So they need to be mad, and then they need to be sad and disappointed, and then they adapt. So when you're stuffing gently her into the car seat, know that actually it's a good thing. So as long as you can get her buckled in, her screaming and stuff is irritating to you, but it's kind of helping her process to adapt. Because once she realizes, and car seats is an easy one because we tend not to give in on that one. But she'll learn over a fairly quickly period of time that this isn't really going to go my way. Like, this is one of those consistent things that mom makes me do all the time. And eventually she'll learn to adapt. You can try all the tips and tricks. They often make it worse because kids figure out very quickly that you're manipulating them. And when kids feel like they're being manipulated, they resist even more. So empathy, I know you do. Oh, you don't like your car seat. And the thing with toddlers is sometimes it helps to kind of match when you're giving them feedback or empathy, try and match their level a little bit. So if they're tantruming, don't tantrum with them. But because language is not happening in the brain when they're upset, your affect, the way you deliver a message, can register with that brain. So, she may not hear you say you don't like the car seat, but if you say, oh, you don't like that car seat, she won't hear the words, but this registers. So try and match her affect a little bit when you're giving her feedback. Try and make games as much as you can. Children don't work, they play. Give her lots of notice. She's in a stage now where she wants to be the same as you. So, show her that you're putting your seatbelt on and now it's time for you to put yours on. Let her put a doll in a car seat. Like if you've got an old car seat or you can find one, put it out as a toy so that she can practice with a dolly. Or she can practice herself sitting in it and playing around and just experiencing it in a way that isn't emotional.
Okay.
Diapers, I don't know if you've gotten good at doing them standing up yet, but if you haven't, it is a strategy that can be very helpful with busy kids, except for bowel movements, obviously. But some kids will be much more cooperative standing up.
I started doing it up and then having her put her legs in and doing like a pull up.
Yep. You got to do what works for her as much as you can. But because she's active, sometimes it can help to maybe have a little dance or something before you do a diaper change, so you get rid of a little bit of that energy. Those kinds of things. So you've got to respect the energy level because that's her temperament. So that's, that is what it is. Somebody in your family is active. But you've got to kind of work with some of these things with kids and know that it will pass. It's aggravating as all heck. Wait till she starts taking the diapers off and you're putting onesies on backwards and things like that because you don't want her to get to them. They're smart and they've got nothing else to think about all day. Don't forget that. So just try as much as you can to make it as fun as you can. Give her as much practice. Give her diapers, like old diapers that don't fit her anymore, and dollies. Like, let her be the one in charge some of the time in play. And she might, some of the time, be a little more compliant when you ask her to do it. So let's do your dollies.
I ask her, like,
Sorry?
do you want to change your diaper? Can we change your diaper?
No, don't ask her.
No.
There are some things we ask kids and some things we don't, as we want to be the alpha parent, the parent that tells our kids we're in charge. So there are some non-negotiables. So diapers tends to be, you can say, do you want to do it now or in 5 minutes? They'll always delay it, but she doesn't know time. So, but yeah, some things we don't ask our kids, but do you want dinner now? No, that's not up to the child. Whether the child eats dinner is up to them, but when and what you make is your decision as the adult.
Okay.
So if you take that more authoritative, you know what, it's time to change your diaper now, and give her a warning. In 5 minutes, we're going to change your diaper, and set a timer. Maybe sometimes that can help. And the timer is the bad guy, not you. Those kinds of things. But basically, kids don't like to be restricted.
Okay. And then when she's like angry, she's biting. How do I stop that?
Yeah, that's a she'll outgrow it.
Okay.
Again, it's a visceral response. You can't let her bite you
No.
or other people. So you need to her physically move her and things like that. You can give her something to bite, a teething ring, something like that. And again, it's the empathy. You're so angry, or you're so frustrated. And she'll move through it. Biting is a normal stage.
Okay.
My son bit actually until he was 4. I ran a home daycare starting when he was 2, and he bit every new child that came into my daycare. It was almost like he was saying, I'm the boss, she's my mom, so let's just get this straight right now. But he's a very sensitive, intense child, and it was just his way of expressing the feeling. So work with the feeling, not the behavior.
Okay.
As much as you can, and give her appropriate ways to, you can either give her something to bite, or you can try and teach. She's still young, but you could try and give her something else to do. That's not going to hurt somebody else.
Yeah, she'll bite the table or the chair. She'll bite my shirt. She'll bite me.
Yeah. So tables and chairs, I mean, she'll learn very quickly that those are not good things to bite. You can't let her hurt herself, but certainly not biting you or even herself. Some kids will bite themselves. So again, we want to sort of move her to something else while we're validating the feeling. No, don't do that. You're really angry. Let's dance, or let's jump, or let's hit a pillow, or whatever.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All righty. We're going to whip through these other things now.
Thanks, Nikki. I think that's it for questions. There was a couple things that went around in the chat there, but I don't think you could see it, but I'll pass it back over to you now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So not listening and defiance. They kind of go together. So, and they are normal. These are all normal behaviors. Let me put that out first. These are very typical normal behaviors for young children, and even older children for different reasons sometimes. So not listening and defiance often share the same feelings and needs. So don't get all caught up in one or the other. They're often one and the same thing. One of the things I suggest is you do a connection check in terms of your relationship. So are there patterns to these behaviors? Are they during transition times? Are they during times when you pick up? Are they during times where you're distracted? So just do an honest check with yourself on whether or not the relationship between you and your child in that moment, because remember last time I said children live very much in the moment. Do you feel like the relationship is attached and connected? Is your child feeling connected to you? Because if they're not, you'll get a lot of counter will, which is what not listening and defiance is really all about. And children are wired to push away or do the opposite of what you ask if they're not connected to you. And this is nature's way of protecting them. So children are wired to only listen to the people they're attached to. So that way, that's why when we talk about stranger danger and all those kinds of things, most children, unless they're taught otherwise, or they're just that easygoing, flexible temperament sometimes, if somebody approaches a child they don't know and tells them to do something, their automatic instinct should be to say, no, I'm not doing that. And Mother Nature has designed that so that people who shouldn't be influencing and guiding your children don't. So there's this natural instinct in children to resist and push away if they're not feeling connected. Unfortunately, they don't differentiate. The attachment instinct doesn't differentiate between somebody they don't know and they're not attached to, and a parent that they're not attached to in the moment. So you want to just do that little connection check. Neufeld has a saying, connect before you direct. So mindfully and intentionally do something with your child that you feel connects them. Give them a hug, sing a song together, something that you know brings you and your child together before you ask them to do something. And you will get not 100% compliance, you'll never get that, but you will probably find you'll get more compliance. And counter will happens when children feel like they don't have any autonomy, that somebody is telling them what to do. And that is our job. So we have to figure out how to make that work. Or if they're working on mastering something. So you're in a hurry in the morning and 2-year-old Susie is fighting with her shoes and she wants to put them on. And you say, here, honey, let me help you. And she's like, no. And she throws her shoe. She's working on mastering putting those shoes on. So you're interfering with her developmental mastery task. So in that case, you would allow enough time for her to do that. Maybe you put your shoes on before breakfast, right? So you got lots of time. So just understand there's always a reason for some of these behaviors, okay? And our job is to be detectives a little bit and try and figure out, because you know your children best, what is this all about? It does help to understand the basics of child development. So if you find yourself with some time, there's some excellent material and websites and things, Christine can help you find them, that give you just some basic child development information so that you can know in your heart that this is a development thing. This is not something I need to be worried about. Knowing children's development helps you have reasonable expectations, helps you support your children, and also helps you if there are red flags with your child. So ask your teachers, ask your ECEs, read up on it. You don't have to read all of it. You can read just the stage your child is at the time. But it's really helpful if you find some time to learn a little bit about the basic stage your child is at, what they can and cannot do. So does anybody have a not listening or defiance example they would like to share? And we'll work quickly through this checklist. Is that Jessica or Sarah?
I don't know if their hand is still up from before. Oh, Jessica took hers down. Does anybody else on our call today want to share a situation perhaps that we could work through the steps with Nikki? I think Sarah's hand is still up, but I think it's from before as well.
I think with my son, the not listening part comes when either he's tired or hungry.
Okay.
And, you know, so like, I know he's hungry, but he doesn't want to sit down at the dining table and eat.
Because he's a busy
Because
three.
he's not hungry, he just wants to read a book or something like that. So then we kind of have to talk him through it. I will either give him like a baby carrot or something, and that's when he will say, oh, I want more. And then I'm like, okay, let's go to the dining table and sit and eat, because that's actually what he wants. I don't know how to help him recognize that he's hungry. I don't even know if this is the age when I should teach him about it, or is that something that would come naturally? I don't know.
Okay, so let's work through this a little bit. So when he's defying you and he's not listening, let's check in with you. So how do you feel when he sort of defies you and says no and he doesn't listen? You say to
Honestly,
yourself,
I feel bad because usually when he's not listening or defiant, he's also upset.
okay,
And I feel like, you know, he understands that he's his own entity now. He's not that 1-year-old where he thought that he and me are one and the same.
right,
But then he is also at the same time small and powerless.
right.
In that moment, he cannot fix his own food, right? And
So do you feel like you're fairly calm when you respond to him?
yeah.
Okay, okay. So that's step one, check in. Sometimes when our kids don't listen and or particularly when they defy us, it evokes some things in us. We get angry, we get sort of that, no, I'm the boss, you're gonna do what I say. We get that sort of mentality and it can affect negatively how we respond. So we need to calm down, but you're already calm, so that's great. You've already considered the situation and determined sort of what his needs are. He's
Yeah.
hungry, he's tired. So you've recognized those things in him. So that's step two. Sounds like you're responding calmly with empathy. You're trying to work with him. You're trying to sort of move him to, you know, where he needs to be. Sometimes it's not helpful to ask kids what's wrong or are you this and why are you doing that? Kids don't understand why they're doing what they're doing generally. So if you think he's hungry, it's okay as the alpha parent to say, you know what, I think you're hungry. Or you know what, I think you're tired. And often kids will say, no, I'm not tired because they're scared you're going to put them to bed.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's okay to be tired and maybe we'll just have a quiet time and read a book for a few minutes and those kinds of things, rather than just automatically going to bed. So you're doing things that will help to de-escalate him, right? So you're saying you're doing these things and eventually you can get him over to the table. So take his lead, calm him down. You know, you can, once he's calm enough to hear your words, you can give him a choice. Lots of kids who aren't listening and defiant like choice. You know, are you ready to sit at the table and eat dinner, or do you need a few more minutes? Or do you want to have a glass of water first? Or glasses of water break a lot of momentum. If you're feeling really, really upset with your child, stand up, say to your child, you know what, mommy's really thirsty. I'm going to go get a glass of water, just to give yourself 2 minutes, and say to your child, would you like one too? Because that says to your child, we're still okay, right? If you just get up and say, I'm going for a glass of water, and you storm out, your child's like, oh, you're leaving, I'm coming after you, because they don't like separation. You say, do you want one too? I'll bring you one. Then you might get a couple of minutes to pull yourself together in the kitchen. Sounds like you're taking your time. Is there anything based on this sort of checklist that you have questions about, or that you think you do really well, or you could change?
So one question I have, I don't know whether or not I should change this. So he usually ends up, on a regular basis, he's extremely careful. He won't bump into something by accident, like he's not accident prone. However, when he's tired, he gets accident prone, obviously. And then, you know, sometime back when he was 2 or so, if he would fall down, I would hold him, you know, just hold him and sit there with him. And now he would just push me and he would say, don't snuggle me, you know, that kind of thing. Don't kiss me, don't snuggle me. So I let him go. And then he would ask, why aren't you kissing me? And now I'm confused.
The sign of a truly tired child. I don't want you to do it, but do it anyway. Yeah, that's a tough one. So when you're not in the moment, you can have he's 3.5, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can have a little bit of a talk with him and say, you know what, sometimes I get really mixed up because you say this and then you say that, and you know, But the other thing is you're the alpha. So sometimes if you just take the lead, children will kind of just fall into whatever you're guiding them to. I'm reluctant to suggest to parents that they ask a child if they want a hug, but in this case, you might ask him. Sometimes a hug might feel too much, so maybe just hold his hand, do something that's sort of less big. Hold his hand, touch his shoulder, see if that is a compromise for him, because he obviously still wants you, need you around. But children, when they're tired and when they're upset, often don't know what they need or want. So that's, sometimes we don't get the clues that we need or that we would like to help us sort of make that work for them. So in 1 minute he wants you and the next minute he doesn't, and that's pretty typical. So you got to kind of play it by ear. Try a little bit less is more kind of thing.
Okay.
And see whether or not, you know, or let him take the lead. Just sit with your arms open and see if he climbs into your lap. And let him sort of take the initiation a little bit.
Okay. And then other place where he has not been listening of late is, he used to help us around the home. So he would help set up the dining table. He used to be so excited to do that. Now it's like, you set up the dining table, I'll just come eat. And I feel like, wow, I mean, yeah, I don't know what to do.
So chores are a good thing for kids. So you can find ways, again, when he's calm, to either designate certain jobs for everybody in the family, and most of the time that gets pretty monotonous. So there's a few strategies. You can use a job jar and the child can just draw one. And there's conversations and things and messaging that has to happen that's sort of, family is the first team that a child is part of. So, we really need you. So he's at that stage of development where he wants to know why he's important. So helping him understand the significance of his part, not just in chores, but just in being part of the family, can sometimes help them want to, do things that are part of the family. The other thing is, again, to check that relationship. If you're busy working and he's been playing and he's been separated from you for a while, to then just come in and say, okay, you set the table. You're going to have to do something to connect. Again, give him a hug, tell him, have him come over and help you stir, or something that reconnects you, and then that connect before you direct. So then you can say, and you can give him a choice. Do you want to set all the table, or do you want to set just your spot, or daddy's spot, or mommy's spot? Or, do you want to put the cups out, or do you want to do everything? So giving him some autonomy. You're not saying you don't have to set the table, but you're allowing him to have some choice within that.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question in there that I think is worth touching on, and it's about what is age appropriate chore, like a list of age appropriate chores. And I just know, even myself, when my girls were young, Chacha, and this might work with you as well, as like, again, I think Nikki talked about, like, the more we tell them what to do, the more they're gonna counter will and not do it. So I always give them the choice. So there would always be a list of, these are all the things that need to happen. There'd be a picture of it, and choose one. So then I'll pick up the other three, kind of thing. But age appropriate chores, I don't know, Nikki, if you have any thoughts around it, but I think any kind of help around the house, like, and they're not going to do it the way we would do it, but it doesn't.
And that's what makes it age appropriate. Like, so age appropriate does not mean doing it the way we do it.
No.
So part of it is whatever your child is interested in. So if your child has this great interest in vacuuming, you need to jump on that and let them vacuum, even though you're going to have to do it later when they're not home. Don't overdo a chore. Don't do over a chore that your child's just done. So take your child's cues, using visuals, using pictures. We really need you to help is better than do this. You're part of the family and we all work together, and we need your help. And yeah, I think any chore is, as long as it's safe. So you're not going to let your child unload the carving knives of the dishwasher. but they may be able to unload the plastics of the dishwasher. So you may have to adapt your chores a little bit. And it's really around your expectations as the adult. Sometimes having chores done by a 2 or a 3 or even a 4-year-old is actually in the short term more work. But in the long run, parenting is a long game. It really is a long game. Everything you're doing now, all these little things and all this work you're putting in now will pay off 100-fold when your kids are older. So kids are generally a lot of work on the front end, but if you give them everything they need and all the, all the skills and things and the relationship pieces, it does get a little easier as they get older. So if chores just become part of what we do as a family and everybody partakes, then when they're 7 and 8 and 9, they might say, oh, I don't want to do that, but they know it's just part of what our family does. So it becomes this predictable routine. You can give your child a little dish pan and some soapy water, and they may not do the dishes. Oh, I don't know who does dishes by hand anymore, unless your dishwasher's broken. But you may have to adapt the chore. But look at what your child might be interested in. When they're young, they really want to be like you. So generally, they're going to want to do what you're doing, and that's okay. But any interest they have in doing chores, you want to jump on and really appreciate and allow them the experience, because you don't want to be that parent when your child is 30 whose kid is coming home with laundry baskets, who's asking you to make them dinner. Like, these are life skills. Chores are life skills. So you're actually doing your kids a big favor. And again, kids do not work. Kids play. So the more fun you can have with chores, throw on some music, whatever, the more fun you can make it, the more engaged and likely they will be to participate. But I don't think there's really any limit. I mean, use your judgment. Your child, safety is always first. But if your child shows an interest in wanting to try something, then adapt it and let them try it. The other suggestion around chores. So in some houses, there are some chores that are just you must do's, like make your bed or whatever your family has as the must do's. But then as children get older, they want some autonomy and they need money. So you can have like chore boards or chore lists that have money attached to them. So children can choose to do it or not. You might get $5 to mow the lawn or whatever it is. So again, this is about choice. So there are some things that we just do as a family. We set the table, we clean the house, blah, blah, blah. I mean, every Saturday morning we had to get up at my house and clean the house before we were allowed to go out. And I hated my father for that. But I know, I don't always do it, but I know how to keep a tidy house. So, sometimes kids have to do things that they don't like to do or want to do, but in the long run, in the long game, these are things that kids need to learn. But make it fun.
Thanks, Nikki.
Fun, fun, fun. Okay, in the interest of time, just because I know Sarah had an example, so I'm going to talk just briefly about tantrums, and then we'll move to Sarah's example if she's still on, about the aggression. Tantrums are a sign that a child has been completely overwhelmed with their big feelings. And the goal is to try and predict the tantrum and stop it before it starts. Because quite frankly, in my experience, once a tantrum starts, it's a train with no brakes. So all your strategies about trying to distract kids and move them, they're not going to work. Once the child is in a full-blown tantrum, you need to sit back, make sure that child is safe, and wait. Because the child needs to work it out. Because there's very little you're going to be able to do in that moment while that child is full out tantruming that's going to help. So just know that children do not like to feel this out of control. This is not a choice by any means. And often they come out and they're kind of scared. So again, we look at how, as a parent, would we respond to a scared child? And tantrums, again, evoke some big stuff in us as adults. We get worried that people are going to judge us and that, there's something wrong and we're terrible parents. And so pay attention to your self-talk. What are you saying about yourself and what are you saying about your child? Tantrums are completely normal. We have them as adults. Some of us do the same things kids do, and some of us have found ways, because we're older, to have tantrums that are a little more contained. But young children, when they're out of control, they need you to be in control. It's really, really important that you find your zen and wait it out. Because your job is to keep them safe, to make sure they're not smacking their heads on the floor or doing something dangerous. Some children like to be held while they're tantruming. That containment makes them feel safe. Most kids don't. And I'm not talking about restraint. I'm talking about containment. So it's mutual. So if you sit on the floor with an open posture, when your child's ready, they'll probably climb into your lap on their own when they feel like they're able to do that. So just be available. Do not talk through a tantrum. Makes it worse. You can empathize. You can use sounds. Oh, those kinds of things that children don't have to process, but really communicate some empathy. But you got to wait them out. You got to wait them out. And they are very, very common, especially in 2-year-olds. 18 months to 2.5, huge tantrum stage. And kids will learn over time to manage them. But if you can see it coming, you can try and circumvent it. All righty. So is our friend Sarah there? Sarah. So aggression is a result of unresolved anger. So kids get stuck in angry. They don't move on. Sorry, I'm just going to my phone pinging here. I thought I'd turned it off. Kids get stuck. They get aggressive because they're stuck in this angry place. Aggression is a very primitive fight response. So when we look at that middle part of the brain, fight, flight, or freeze, it's a fight response. Therefore, if you think about that fight, flight, and freeze, you know that those are responses that are just automatic. So very often kids automatically will fight or go into that aggressive place. And believe it or not, aggression, we are one of the most aggressive species on the face of the earth, us humans. So it is a natural response that as a species we have. So our goal as parents is to help children to manage those feelings and express them. We don't want them to bury them. We want them to be able to express them in more socially appropriate ways over time. There needs to be strong boundaries around aggression. We can't let kids hurt themselves or other kids. But I just want to sort of normalize it a little bit. It is not, it evokes a really big response in adults, and in particularly young children. This is a very natural response to a lot of feelings, but angry is a big one. And boys are socialized that aggression is okay. Crying and telling somebody you're sad or angry if you're a boy is not. That's not the message they get. But they get messages through a variety of means that punching somebody out, that's an okay thing for a boy or a man to do. So we really want to watch those influences and those things that are in society that are telling our kids messages that we may not want to share with our kids. So. All right, Sarah, let's see how quickly we can kind of run through this one.
Sure, no problem. I may have to spell some stuff because my daughter's right beside me. So
Okay.
That's just, yeah. So I'm struggling with aggression with her. There were 2 instances I can't say the word, recent things that have happened. One was at school, so I don't know entirely the context, but she got ANGRY.
Yep.
And HIT another child with her metal water bottle. So
Okay.
not good. And then last week there was an incident at swimming lessons where she BITE one of her friends in the class.
Okay.
And this is not for lack of me trying. Like I've
No.
done since she was little.
No,
You know, hands aren't for hitting. You know,
this
like
isn't
the
about
books.
you.
Yeah, no,
You're
I've
doing the
just,
right things.
yeah, no, and I know I am, but it's just, it's also a little bit, I guess, like you said, it's triggering for me as well, some of the behavior.
Yeah.
Because I thought by four, I'd be kind of out. It is very creepy. Yeah. I thought by four, I'd kind of be out of this. And I also too don't want to be, you know, it's just not fun as a parent. And it's also too, I think it's when she, I just worry, maybe this is a longer term one, is like I was saying earlier about like connecting at school to little friends. It's like, well, if you're the kid that's going to be aggressive, nobody's going to want to be your friend, right? So yeah.
Yeah, don't go down that road yet.
Yeah.
So she's under a lot of stress, right? So when we look at the feelings and needs,
Yeah.
she's highly stressed. At school, she's probably feeling what? Think a little bit about that iceberg thing. What are some of the things?
Oh yeah.
Right? So
yeah, like I think there's separation there, but like I said,
Yeah.
I think that the thing is, I also, because she was OPCC, and it was like, you know, it was pretty, like, it was amazing. I didn't realize, you didn't realize how good you get it till it's gone.
till it's gone.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it wasn't, it like, I just, it feels like, yeah, I'm sure in her little brain, it's just like circuit overload.
Yeah. So again, we have to go back to, is there a way to rethink school if that's a huge stressor? If I'd give her till Christmas, some kids don't adjust until Christmas time.
Yeah, that was my plan. Was that if after Christmas and I can't. If by Christmas things are better, January she's got to go. She may have to go back to OPCC.
Yeah,
like that's just.
And again, just consider it a lap year. A lot of kids are not ready for JK. The system is very different than childcare. OPCC, I have a bias. I worked there for 20 years, but they are exceptional at what they do. They have exceptional staff. The expectations are high, and kids thrive at OPCC. And when you get a place like that sets the foundation for kids, it creates a better experience when they get into some of those less, those environments that don't provide those same things. The school system is a big beast, and there are fabulous, examples of teachers and human beings, and there are things, and I am in no way condemning the schools. Teachers have their hands full, but you've got two adults in a class with 20 to 30 kids. That's way different than having 2 teachers or 3 teachers in a class with 10 or 15. And again, the mandates are different. So when you have her and she's not in school, I think the job is you can teach. There's lots of tools around helping kids learn about aggression. You do need to partner with the school. So once you've got some things that you think might work for her, you might want to share those tools with the school. And so one of the things that I know a lot of schools do is they have a box or a tent or a cave or somewhere where children can go when they start to feel, big feelings, to pull themselves together, because unfortunately in school, teachers aren't always available for them to help them. So, and looking at her after school stuff, a lot of children who struggle in school, the last thing they need is extra stuff after school. So because they're waking up overloaded, they're coming home completely empty, and now we're putting them in extra activities like swimming. So you might want to consider whether or not swimming is essential enough to continue to put her in, or whether she actually needs more time at home with you. Until she makes this adjustment.
Oh yeah, this kid gets buckets of time with me, like buckets. Like that's not. And what I have been doing is the Wednesdays since her swimming is I don't put her at school. Like she's not winning any attendance record at school. Like I was looking at
That's
today,
okay.
and because she's
Doesn't
been
count,
sick so
Jacob.
much and everything. Yeah, no, and that's why, and I've kind of been like, if you need a mommy day, just tell me. And so she'll wake up and be like, I need a mommy day. I'm like, okay, no problem. So that's good advice about the swimming lessons. Like she was in another activity, which I scaled back. But what was I going to say is I think I've tried to do it where she's off that day and she has the day with me versus doing the activity. But
Right.
okay.
So
So
one of the things you can do as a parent, I mean, you can't change the school system. It's a big beast. You can make little headway, but you do have to advocate for your child, first of all. So if there are things going on that are concerning, you need to continue to communicate those respectfully to the school. This isn't the one I want. So one of the things you can do at home, I'm not a proponent of bringing school problems home because often they're related to the environment at school. So when kids get in fights with other kids at school, they're supposed to do at home when there's no other kids and there's no problem there. But what you can do is look at sort of what her needs are. So she needs to learn to recognize and channel some of this emotion in a different way. So you can work on that. The school may not be doing it, but you can start to teach her at home through some of these strategies that on the screen. And you can start to practice some of this stuff. So these big feelings, what can you do? How do you know they're coming? And you got to keep doing it over and over and over and over. It takes 10,000 hours to master something. So these want to be competitions and games you play and things you do every single day. And eventually, particularly once her stress level is down, then, it will get better and she'll have some strategies to work with. Saying to her, you can't HIT and you can't BITE. She already knows that. I can promise you at her age, she already knows she shouldn't. But she can't help it. So we want to give empathy. Those big feelings, they take over and they make you do things that you don't want to do. I know you don't want to do those things. So let's figure out some other things. Maybe you give her cue cards or you get her teachers on board and things like that. She needs skills, right? And the skills are going to come with the learning that happens when she's not in an emotional state. So, when she's home with you and having lots of fun, those are the times to have those games about what do you do when, and practice, lots and lots and lots of practice. It goes a lot further than just words. Words feel like lectures and nobody wants to be lectured.
okay.
So that would be sort of my initial sort of suggestion. And it'll take time. I think you're right in giving her enough time to adjust. Hopefully the school staffing situation will settle down. I know my grandson, 3 years old, is going through the same thing in daycare. He hasn't had the same teacher for more than about a month for the last year and a half. And it's taken a toll. It's, kids need those adult attachment figures, and it's hard for them when they're away from you. But these are very natural reactions. They may not be socially acceptable, but we do need to know that they're natural reactions for her to have, given the amount of stress she's under. So reduce her stress as much as you can, teach her the strategies, and just keep monitoring what she needs.
Do you have any other resourcing that you can point to, like even what you're just saying about cue cards or some of the verbiage or language? Like
there's a 0to3.org, spelled out ZERO and TOTHRE. They have some good resources. And there's taxing my brain. I haven't done this for a while. There's something called the Center for Social and Emotional Learning, I think. So Center for Social and Emotional. I think there's another. anyway, it's from Vanderbilt University. I'll see if I can find the link and give it to Christine. They have social stories. Social stories are a great way to teach kids. But they have lots of practical hands-on resources that you can print off that you can make. That's where the sort of box came in. There's a story called Tucker Turtle, and it's about anger. And classrooms make this Tucker Turtle shape out of a box, and it's all about him pulling in and pulling himself together. So some classrooms have made it so the kids can go in there and be the turtle and until they can cope and things like that. So I will send that to Christine because it's the Center for Social Emotional Learning, but I feel like there's another letter in there. It's out of Vanderbilt University.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we're way over time, so let's just skip by all this. You're doing a great job, Sarah, by the way. You're very tuned into your daughter. You know exactly what she needs. You're adapting to what she needs, so good for you. Not that you need my approval.
No, thank you. It was a bit of a rough week. Like I'm getting calls from YMCA, from swimming, and notes from teachers. It just doesn't feel good, right? So thank you for that.
Don't let your teachers put what happens at school on you as something to deal with at home. Because again, so much of what kids do at school is because of the school environment or the relationships at school. It's really hard to and inappropriate, in my opinion, to be expected to discipline or manage those at home. You can teach. So like I suggested, teaching her how to deal with her feelings is a life skill. It's not school specific. But there are things that happen at school that are school specific that can't be replicated at home, and you can't be expected to fix those. So take some of that with a grain of salt. This is just sort of a summary, and then we're going to sign off. Thank you for those of you who have stuck through. I know I said I was going to make this an hour, and I should have known better than to even state that. All feelings are okay, but all behavior is not. But behavior in young children is not manipulative or a choice. It may feel like that, and there will come a point where children will do things with a bit of intention, but it's not as much manipulation as it is learned. So children can learn that if I have a tantrum, I will get what I want in a store. It doesn't start off that way, but they learn because every time they have a tantrum, you give them what they want to make them quiet. And it's like, at some point, the light bulb goes off and it's like, So they'll start to whine and you're like, oh no, here. So that's a learned behavior. That's not manipulative. Manipulative in the terms I'm talking about require forethought and planning. And children's little thinking brains are not capable of that until they're older. So it may feel like manipulation, but don't get caught up in that manipulation cycle. They're not manipulating you. It's okay to take a few minutes to decide how you will respond. If your child is not hurting himself, it's okay to take a breath, grab a glass of water, and really give it some thought. What am I going to do with this? What's going on here? Ask yourself those questions. And don't feel pressured by outside influences. I know this is a big problem for parents these days. They feel like everybody's watching them and judging them, and we don't have that sort of tribe or that sense of community that parents need. But your job is to parent your child. So try and block out, if you're in the mall, most people are looking at you with empathy, by the way, not with judgment. It may feel like judgment because you're judging yourself, but your child's behavior is not necessarily usually a reflection of you. It's just them. How you respond to it is a reflection of you. Children in distress do not respond well to more pressure and stress. So when you start to feel stressed because you feel like everybody's watching you, you will parent in a different way. And then your kids are like, what? They need consistency. In the early years, much of the behavior you encounter is based in development. So this too shall pass, faster than you might think. Self-care is not selfish. Parenting is hard, and sometimes you're a better parent when your needs have been met. But you have to meet your own needs. It's not the job of your children. Give children time and space to work through their feelings. this growing up thing takes 20 to 30 years. You can't fast track development. Things like routines, structure, predictability, consistency, and limits. Kids need and like limits. Even if they resist them and push back, they need them. All help children learn to manage their feelings and their behavior. These little things can make a difference. And the parent-child relationship and connection is essential to teaching children about feelings and learning how to regulate themselves. And that is all I have. So I still see 7 people with us. Wow, I'm impressed.
Oh, there I can unmute. I don't know, my computer's giving me a hard time. Thank you, Nikki. There was a lot of very meaningful conversation there. And I know, like, connecting everyone, you know, to understand that we're all going through different things, but we all have very similar things going on with our kiddos. So this information is so very, very valuable. A lot of it really brings me back to that thinking. I was toying with the idea of trying to put together more information over the summer, and I never got to it, on having some workshops or webinars or something on the whole emotional literacy piece, because that's what stems out of all of this as well, is finding, you know, I loved that you included the happiness part as well. Like, it's not always focusing on those more challenging behaviors, but also finding those, you know, with your iceberg, you know, and finding ways to label all the emotions our kids are feeling. And the more we do that, the more we co-regulate, as you said, and spend the time in with them rather than the time out. You know, we're only teaching them day by day and helping them grow. And it's
important to focus on the good things, because we tend to focus on the bad, and then that's all we see. If that's we see what we're focused on.
Yeah.
If we're focused on the negative because it's challenging us, and we forget about the positive, then it starts to become overwhelming, and we start to say things like, "Oh my God, they're always angry," or "They're always in a tantrum," when in fact it may be once every 3 days. But because you're not noticing when they're not in a tantrum, and your focus is in that tantrum thing because it's causing you distress, then we don't get a really good view of overall what's going on. It becomes all consuming and very stressful for us because we start to catastrophize it.
Yes,
we start to make it sound like it's always. So it's really important to notice, when is your child happy and why? What is it? What's going on when that child is happy and content?
Emotions are such a complex thing to help our children learn.
It's complicated.
It's just a reminder, we do have our amazing resource kits here that are for Burrow, and there is one on emotions. So, you know, it's everything from children's literature to games, puppets, all these kinds of things that are going to help support that emotional literacy in our kids. So those are available for borrowing if anyone's interested. There was a lot of chat.
If I can recommend one book, The Whole Brain Child by Dr. Dan Siegel.
And I have that here if anyone wants to borrow it as well.
An amazing book.
Yeah, I have quite a few copies, I think. So a lot of chat there. I think that Nikki and I are going to have to connect because I think we're really going to want to follow up with some great resources, some of the things we talked about today. So be patient. I will send you something. I will be taking a little bit of a holiday, but I will be sending you some follow-up resources. And, you know, that'll just bring us to our next conversation, which is going to be the 8th of November. I'm always a day ahead.
You are a day ahead. Yeah.
The 8th of November. So mark it in your calendars. That will be our next session with Nikki. So I look forward to having that time with her.
I want to be on social skills and friends.
Social skills, yes, best friends, because that's the next one, right? When they start
probably touch a tiny bit on bullying because that's all part of it.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you, everyone, for sticking it through to get all this wonderful information.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Nikki.
You're very welcome. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.